Hey Reddit, I have been lurking for a while but never thought I'd be the one posting here. Guess life has a funny way of throwing you curveballs. So, here goes nothing. I'm a 45-year-old guy who thought he had it all figured out. Beautiful wife, a son who has my pride and joy, and a stable job. Little did I know my life was about to turn into a soap opera. About a year ago I started noticing some weird behavior from my wife, Linda. She'd become distant, always glued to her phone, and had these sudden girls' nights out that she'd never done before. At first I brushed it off. We'd been married for 20 years, and I trusted her. But trust can be a dangerous thing. It all started coming to a head when I overheard a hushed conversation between my son, Jake, and his mom. Something about keeping the secret and Mr. Big Shot. My curiosity got the best of me, so I confronted Jake. He swore up and down it was nothing, just some stupid teenage stuff. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Then one night I got home early from work. Linda was out, supposedly at another one of her girls' nights. Jake was in his room, so I decided to do a little snooping. I found Linda's laptop, and as much as I hated invading her privacy, I opened it. There it was, in black and white emails, texts, even photos of her with some guy named Mark. Turns out Mr. Big Shot was her lover, but wait, it gets worse. I confronted her when she got home. She didn't deny it. In fact, she looked almost relieved. She spun this elaborate tale about how she felt neglected, how Mark made her feel alive again. I was furious, but what really got me was Jake's involvement. He knew. He'd been covering for her because Mark had promised to fund his college education. And get this, Jake even took Mark's last name legally, thinking it would somehow solidify his future. The betrayal cut deep, from both my wife and my own flesh and blood. I was ready to throw them both out, but then the plot thickened. About a year later, karma came knocking. Mark, the so-called big shot, got caught up in some shady business deals and went bankrupt. And to add insult to injury, he cheated on Linda with some younger woman. Suddenly, Linda and Jake were at my doorstep, looking pitiful and desperate. I won a lie. Seeing them like that gave me a sick sort of satisfaction. But I wasn't about to play the fool again. I cut Jake out of my will and began the process of terminating my parental rights. Harsh? Maybe. But the betrayal was too much. So, that is the start of my story. There is a lot more to unpack, but I'll leave it here for now. Thanks for listening, Reddit. I'll update you all soon with the next part. Back again with the next chapter of this mess. After that initial confrontation, things spiraled out of control pretty quickly. Linda and Jake moved out temporarily, staying with some friends until they figured out what to do next. I was left alone in the house that once felt like a home, now just a hollow shell filled with memories that stung like salt in a wound. During this time, I met with my lawyer to start the process of terminating my parental rights and cutting Jake out of my will. It wasn't an easy decision, but the betrayal was too deep. I had to protect myself from further emotional harm. My lawyer, Mr. Thompson, was sympathetic but thorough. He laid out the steps we'd need to take and assured me it was within my rights to make these changes. While I was dealing with the legal side of things, Linda kept trying to reach out. She'd call, text, even show up at my workplace, begging for a chance to explain, to make things right. Each time, her pleas fell on deaf ears. I couldn't trust a word that came out of her mouth. I remembered the lies she'd told so effortlessly, the way she'd spun her stories to make me feel like I was the problem. One evening, I got home from work to find Linda waiting on the porch. I was ready to turn around and leave, but she begged for a few minutes of my time. Against my better judgment, I let her in. We sat in the living room, a room that had witnessed countless family gatherings, now a battlefield of emotions. She started crying, telling me how Mark had used her, how she'd realized too late that she'd thrown away everything for a mirage. She begged for forgiveness, promising she'd do anything to make it up to me. I just sat there, numb, watching her tears fall. I wanted to feel something, anger, sadness, anything, but all I felt was emptiness. Then she dropped a bombshell. She admitted that the affair hadn't been a one-time mistake, but an ongoing relationship spanning 2 years. She'd lied about business trips and late-night meetings. She'd even taken Jake along on some of their getaways, making him complicit in her deceit. The betrayal ran deeper than I'd imagined. I told her it was too late for apologies, that she'd made her choices, and now had to live with the consequences. I told her about the steps I was taking to cut Jake out of my life and how I was moving forward with the divorce. She looked shocked, like she hadn't realized how serious I was. She tried to argue, to plead, but I stood firm. I made up my mind. As for Jake, he was a different story. He stopped by one weekend when Linda wasn't around. He looked different, older somehow, weighed down by guilt. He tried to explain himself, saying he'd only gone along with it because he thought it was the only way to secure his future. He apologized, genuinely, but I couldn't bring myself to forgive him. The hurt was too fresh, too raw. Jake left in tears that day, and I felt a pang of regret. He was my son, after all, but the betrayal was too much. I couldn't trust him, not after everything he had done. It was clear that both Linda and Jake had made their choices, and now they had to live with the consequences. In the weeks that followed, I tried to rebuild my life. I threw myself into work, picked up new hobbies, and started reconnecting with old friends. It was a slow process, but I was determined to move on. I had to, for my own sanity. So, that's where things stand now. The divorce is in progress, and I am working on cutting ties with Jake. It is a painful process, but I know it is the right thing to do. Thanks for sticking with me through this. I'll update you all soon with what happens next. Thanks for sticking with me. The past few months have been a whirlwind of emotions and legal proceedings. The house feels quieter, almost eerie without Linda and Jake's presence. I thought I'd miss the chaos, but I've come to appreciate the calm. The divorce is moving along, albeit slowly. Linda has been trying to drag things out, hoping I'll reconsider. Every time we meet with our lawyers, she looks at me with those pleading eyes, but I stay focused. The betrayal is still fresh, and I can let myself be swayed by her tears. One particularly rough day, I came home to find Jake waiting for me on the front steps. He looked haggard, like he hadn't slept in days. He asked if we could talk, and against my better judgment, I agreed. We sat in the living room, the same place where Linda had begged for forgiveness. Jake started by apologizing again, but this time he was more composed. He explained how Mark had manipulated both him and Linda, promising the world and delivering nothing. He said he'd realized too late that he'd been used, just like Linda. His voice cracked when he talked about changing his last name, saying he thought it would make things easier, but now saw it as the ultimate betrayal. I listened, trying to keep my emotions in check. Part of me wanted to hug him, tell him everything would be okay, but the pain was still too raw. I told him that actions have consequences, and he had to face the fallout of his choices. He nodded, tears streaming down his face, and asked if there was any way to make things right. I didn't have an answer for him then. After he left, I sat alone in the house, thinking about our conversation. I realized that while I couldn't undo the past, I had to figure out a way to move forward. Cutting him out of my life completely might have been too harsh, but trusting him again wouldn't be easy. Meanwhile, Linda was making things difficult with the divorce. She contested every detail, from the division of assets to the custody of our shared dog, Max. Yeah, Max had become a point of contention. Linda insisted he was happier with her, but I knew better. Max had been my loyal companion through this nightmare, and I wasn't about to let her take him away. During one of our legal battles, Linda showed up looking more disheveled than I'd ever seen her. It was clear that Mark's betrayal had taken a toll on her. She was no longer the confident, manipulative woman who shattered my trust. Instead, she was a broken shell, clinging to the remnants of her past life. One day, after another exhausting court session, Linda approached me in the parking lot. She confessed that Mark had not only cheated on her, but had also stolen money from her and left her in debt. She was desperate, asking if there was any way we could settle things amicably, for Jake's sake if not for hers. I told her I'd think about it. As much as I wanted to see her suffer, I couldn't ignore the fact that Jake was still my son, and his future mattered. I started considering a compromise, one that would allow us to move forward without dragging things out indefinitely. I talked to my lawyer about a potential settlement, one that would ensure I kept the house and Max, while Linda got a fair share of our savings and investments. It wasn't easy, but it seemed like the best way to end this nightmare without further destroying what was left of our family. During this time, I started reconnecting with old friends and even went on a few dates. It was awkward at first, but it felt good to be out there, trying to rebuild my life. I wasn't ready for anything serious, but the distraction helped. Then, just as things seemed to be settling down, I got a call from Jake's school. He'd been caught fighting with another student. When I got to the Principal S office, I saw a side of Jake I hadn't seen before: angry, lost, and hurting. The principal explained that Jake had been struggling ever since the news of our impending divorce and the scandal surrounding his mom's affair had spread. I realized then that as much as I wanted to cut ties, Jake needed me. He was paying the price for his and his mother's mistakes, and it was tearing him apart. I told him we'd figure things out together, but he had to earn back my trust. So, here we are. The divorce is nearing its final stages, and I am working on rebuilding my relationship with Jake. It is a slow process, but I am hopeful. Life isn't perfect, but I am learning to navigate this new reality one day at a time. So, where were we? Right, the divorce was nearing its final stages, and I was trying to rebuild my relationship with Jake. Things were starting to look up. I was settling into a new routine, finding some peace amidst the chaos. But then, the unexpected happened. One evening, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Mark. Yeah, the same Mark who wrecked my marriage and betrayed Linda. He sounded desperate, almost frantic. He wanted to meet and discuss something important. My first instinct was to tell him to go to hell, but curiosity got the better of me. What could he possibly want? We met at a local coffee shop. He looked nothing like the suave, confident man from the photos I'd seen. He was disheveled, clearly stressed out. He started by apologizing for everything, but I wasn't there for his apologies. I wanted to know why he'd reached out. Turns out Mark had been involved in some shady business deals, and now he was in serious trouble. Legal trouble. He needed money, fast, and he was willing to do anything to get it. When he dropped the bombshell, he had dirt on Linda. Serious dirt. Stuff that could ruin her if it got out. I was stunned. What more could there be? He showed me some documents and photos that painted Linda in an even worse light. Apparently, she'd been involved in some fraudulent activities with Mark. They siphoned money from their company to fund their affair and lifestyle. If this got out, Linda could be looking at jail time. Mark wanted me to pay him for the information so he could disappear. He figured I'd want to use it against Linda in the divorce or just for revenge. I told him I needed time to think. I wasn't sure what to do. Part of me wanted to see Linda pay for everything she'd done, but another part of me was worried about Jake. How would this affect him? I talked to my lawyer, Mr. Thompson, about the situation. He advised caution. If we used the information, it could complicate the divorce and drag things out even further. Plus, there was the legal risk of dealing with Mark. He suggested we gather more evidence and consider our options carefully. I decided to confront Linda. She needed to know what Mark was up to and the potential fallout. When I told her, she broke down completely. She admitted everything, sobbing uncontrollably. She said she'd been manipulated by Mark, that she was scared and didn't know what to do. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. I felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, pity, confusion. Despite everything, Linda was the mother of my child. I didn't want to see her go to jail, but I also couldn't just let her get away with it. We agreed to try and handle things quietly to protect Jake and avoid a scandal. Meanwhile, my relationship with Jake was slowly improving. We started spending more time together, talking about everything but the affair. I could see he was trying, and I appreciated that. I knew it would take time to rebuild trust, but I was committed to making it work. As for Mark, I decided not to pay him. Instead, I handed over the evidence he gave me to my lawyer and let the authorities handle it. I wasn't about to get involved in his mess. I wanted to move forward, not get dragged back into the mud. Linda and I came to an agreement in the divorce settlement. She got a fair share of our assets, and I kept the house and Max. It wasn't perfect, but it was the best way to move on without further destruction. Linda agreed to stay out of my life as much as possible, focusing on rebuilding her own and supporting Jake. The divorce was finalized a few weeks later. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of closure. I could finally start to heal and look forward to the future. Jake and I are still working on our relationship. It is not easy, and there are still moments of tension, but we are making progress. I am learning to forgive, not just him, but also myself for the mistakes I made along the way. So, that's the latest. Life is slowly getting back to normal, whatever that means. Thanks for sticking with me through this roller coaster. I'll update you all if anything else comes up. Thanks for sticking with me through this crazy journey. I never imagined my life would take so many twists and turns. But here I am, still standing. It's been a few months since the divorce was finalized, and things are finally starting to settle down. I wanted to share how I am doing and what's been happening lately. After the divorce, I threw myself into work and my hobbies. It was my way of coping, I guess. I started taking woodworking classes, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the time for. It's been therapeutic, creating something with my hands and seeing it come to life. Plus, it keeps my mind off the past. Jake and I have been working hard to rebuild our relationship. It hasn't been easy, but we are making progress. We started going to therapy together, which has helped a lot. Having a neutral third party guide us through our issues has made a huge difference. We were learning to communicate better and trust each other again. One unexpected twist in all of this has been my relationship with my ex-brother-in-law, Mike. He was Linda's brother and had always been a good friend to me. After the divorce, he reached out, offering his support. At first, it was awkward, but we found common ground in our shared betrayal. Mike cut ties with Linda after learning about everything she'd done. He was as shocked and hurt as I was. Mike and I started hanging out more, grabbing beers and catching up on life. It was nice to have someone who understood what I was going through. We even started working out together, pushing each other to stay in shape and keep our minds off the drama. It's been great to have a friend like him during this time. As for Linda, she's been keeping her distance as promised. She's focusing on her own life, trying to rebuild after everything fell apart. I hear from Jake that she's been working hard to pay off her debts and stay out of trouble. It's weird, but I don't feel the anger I used to. I guess I'm starting to let go. But life had one more surprise in store for me. One evening, I was at a friend's barbecue when I met someone new. Her name is Sarah, and she is an old friend of the host. She is smart, funny, and has this amazing energy about her. We hit it off immediately, talking and laughing like we'd known each other forever. I was hesitant at first, scared to jump into something new, but Sarah was patient, understanding my baggage and giving me the space I needed. We started going on casual dates, nothing too serious, just getting to know each other. For the first time in a long time, I felt excited about the future. One day, Sarah and I went on a hike. It was one of those perfect days, clear skies, warm sun, and great company. As we reached the summit, we sat down to enjoy the view. Sarah turned to me and asked about my past, about everything that had happened. I hesitated, but then I realized I trusted her. So I told her everything, the affair, the betrayal, the divorce. She listened without judgment, holding my hand as I spoke. When I finished, she smiled and said, "I'm here for you, no matter what." It was a simple statement, but it meant the world to me. For the first time, I felt like I could really move on. Sarah and I are taking things slow, but I'm hopeful. She has brought a light into my life that I hadn't felt in a long time. It is a reminder that even after the darkest times, there's always a chance for happiness. As for Jake, he's been doing better too. Therapy has helped him deal with the guilt and confusion he felt. He is starting to focus on his future again, talking about college and his dreams. We've even started working on some woodworking projects together. It's been a great way to bond and build something together, both literally and figuratively. Life isn't perfect, but it is getting better. I have learned a lot through this ordeal about trust, forgiveness, and the strength it takes to rebuild. I am grateful for the support I have received, both from friends and from this community. So that's where I am at now, rebuilding, moving forward, and finding new reasons to smile. Thanks for being with me through it all. I'll keep you posted if anything new comes up. After my last update, things with Sarah continued to go well. We were enjoying our time together, taking it slow and just appreciating each other's company. She's been a rock for me, and I am grateful for her support. But just when I thought things were settling down, a new complication arose. Jake started acting out at school again. His grades were slipping, and he was getting into fights. I knew he was still struggling with everything that had happened, but it was hard to see him regress after we made so much progress. I decided it was time for a serious talk. One evening, I sat Jake down and asked him what was going on. He was reluctant at first, but eventually he opened up. He said he felt like he was caught between two worlds trying to support his mom, while also wanting to rebuild our relationship. He admitted he was still angry and confused about everything that had happened and didn't know how to deal with those feelings. We talked for hours, hashing out our emotions and fears. I told him it was okay to feel angry and hurt, but he needed to find healthier ways to express those emotions. We agreed to go back to therapy together, focusing specifically on these new issues. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it was necessary. Meanwhile, Sarah has been incredibly supportive through all of this. She's been patient, giving me the space I need to deal with Jake's issues while also being there for me when I need her. She even suggested that we all do something together, her, Jake, and me. It was a big step, but I agreed. We decided to go on a weekend camping trip, just the three of us. The camping trip was an eye-opener. It was the first time Jake had spent extended time with Sarah, and I could tell he was skeptical at first. But Sarah was great with him, engaging him in conversations about his interests and making him feel included. By the end of the trip, I saw a genuine smile on Jake's face, a rare sight these days. Back home, things started to improve slightly. Jake was doing better at school, and our therapy sessions were helping him navigate his emotions. He even started to open up more about his feelings towards Linda. He admitted he was still angry with her but also missed her. It was a complex mix of emotions, and I knew it would take time for him to work through it all. As for Linda, she reached out to me a few weeks ago asking if we could meet. She said she wanted to discuss Jake and how we could better support him together. I was hesitant but agreed. We met at a neutral location, and to my surprise, Linda seemed genuinely remorseful. She admitted she'd made a lot of mistakes and was struggling to rebuild her life. She wanted to find a way for us to co-parent Jake without causing him more pain. It was a tough conversation, but I could see she was sincere. We agreed to try and communicate more openly about Jake's needs and to support him as best as we could. It wasn't about us anymore. It was about our son and what he needed. One unexpected event that threw me for a loop was finding out about a health scare with my mom. She's been having some health issues, and after some tests, the doctors found a lump. The waiting for results was excruciating, and it brought back memories of my dad's battle with cancer. Thankfully, the lump turned out to be benign, but the scare reminded me of the importance of family and cherishing the time we have. During this time, Sarah was a constant support, helping me stay positive and hopeful. Jake, too, showed a lot of concern for his grandma, which brought us even closer. We started spending more time as a family, visiting my mom and making sure she was well taken care of. One night, after a particularly emotional day, Jake and I were sitting on the porch, just talking. He told me he was grateful for everything I'd done for him and that he was sorry for all the trouble he'd caused. He said he was ready to move forward, to try and be better. It was a breakthrough moment, and I felt a glimmer of hope for the future. So that's where we are now. It has been a roller coaster, but I am feeling more optimistic. Jake is making progress, my mom is doing better, and things with Sarah are stronger than ever. We are all learning to navigate this new reality together, taking it one day at a time. After our camping trip, things with Sarah and Jake were going well. We were becoming a little family unit, and I was feeling more hopeful than ever. Jake was doing better in school, and our therapy sessions were really helping him open up. We were all starting to find a new normal. One weekend, Sarah and I decided to take Jake to a local fair. It was one of those classic small-town fairs with rides, games, and way too much fried food. We were having a great time, laughing and enjoying ourselves. Then out of nowhere, we ran into someone I never expected to see again, Linda's former lover, Mark. Mark looked different, disheveled, and worn out, a stark contrast to the suave man who had once turned my life upside down. He spotted us and approached, looking nervous. I was ready to tell him to get lost, but Sarah squeezed my hand, grounding me. Mark started with an apology, saying he knew he had no right to ask for anything but needed a favor. He explained that he was in a dire situation, out of work, and struggling to get back on his feet. He wanted to make amends for the damage he caused. He had information that could help us, but he needed some financial assistance to get back on his feet. I was skeptical, of course. How could I trust anything he said? But then he mentioned something that caught my attention. He claimed to have evidence that Linda had been involved in more fraudulent activities than we knew about, activities that could still impact Jake's future. He showed me a folder with documents, but he wouldn't hand them over unless we helped him out. I told him I needed time to think about it and would get back to him. As he walked away, Sarah and Jake looked at me, waiting for my reaction. I didn't know what to do. On one hand, I didn't want to help Mark, but on the other, if what he had could help Jake, I had to consider it. That night, I talked to Sarah about it. She was cautious but understood my dilemma. We agreed to consult my lawyer, Mr. Thompson, before making any decisions. We wanted to make sure we were doing the right thing and not getting ourselves into more trouble. Mr. Thompson advised us to proceed carefully. He suggested meeting with Mark again, this time with legal representation, to verify the authenticity of the documents. He also advised us to set clear terms for any financial assistance we might offer. We arranged a meeting for the following week. The meeting was tense. Mark was clearly desperate, but he handed over the documents for Mr. Thompson to review. As we went through them, it became clear that Linda had been involved in more fraudulent activities than we'd known. There were bank statements, emails, and other evidence that painted a very damning picture. If this information got out, it could not only ruin her, but also have serious implications for Jake. We agreed to help Mark with a small financial stipend in exchange for his cooperation and the documents. It wasn't an easy decision, but protecting Jake was my priority. We made sure everything was legally documented to avoid future complications. With the new evidence in hand, Mr. Thompson started working on a plan to mitigate any potential fallout for Jake. He suggested a private settlement with Linda to avoid legal action that could impact Jake's future. It was a delicate situation, but we had to proceed cautiously. Meanwhile, Sarah was a constant source of support. She helped me stay grounded and focused on what mattered most: Jake's well-being. We continued our routine of family activities, therapy, and just spending time together. Jake seemed more at ease, even after I told him about the situation with Mark and his mom. He was upset, but understood why we had to handle things this way. One weekend, we decided to visit my mom again. She'd not been doing well after her health scare, and I wanted to make sure she was okay. Jake and Sarah came along, and it turned into a great family visit. My mom adored Sarah, and it was heartwarming to see them bond. During the visit, my mom pulled me aside. She said she could see how happy Sarah made me and that she hadn't seen me this content in years. It meant a lot coming from her. She also told me to take things one day at a time and not to rush into anything. Wise words I needed to hear. As the weeks passed, Mr. Thompson negotiated a private settlement with Linda. She agreed to pay back a portion of the money she'd taken and to avoid any further legal action. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was the best way to protect Jake and move forward. Life is still throwing challenges my way, but I am learning to navigate them with the support of those I care about. Jake is doing better, Sarah is a constant source of strength, and we're finding our way as a new family unit. I am hopeful for the future, even with its uncertainties. After the settlement with Linda, things began to calm down a bit. Jake seemed to be handling things better, and Sarah and I were growing closer every day. It felt like the storm had finally passed, and we were standing in the calm aftermath trying to rebuild. One weekend, Sarah suggested a short trip to the beach to get away from everything and recharge. It was the perfect idea. We packed up the car, grabbed Jake, and headed to a quaint beach town a few hours away. The trip was everything we needed: sun, sand, and a break from the daily grind. We spent our days lounging on the beach, playing in the waves, and just enjoying each other as company. One evening, as the sun set, Sarah and I took a walk along the shore while Jake built sandcastles nearby. She held my hand and talked about the future, about our hopes and dreams. It was a beautiful moment, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a deep sense of peace. That night, as we sat by a bonfire, Jake turned to me and said, "Dad, I think things are going to be okay." It was simple, but it meant the world to me. It felt like we were finally turning a corner. When we returned home, we got back into our routine, but something had changed. There was a new sense of hope and possibility in the air. Jake's grades were improving, he was getting along better with his peers, and our therapy sessions were more productive than ever. Then one evening I got a call from my mom. She had some news she was getting remarried. I was stunned at first, but then I realized how happy she sounded. She'd met someone at her senior center, a kind man named George. They'd been dating for a while, and he recently proposed. It was unexpected, but I was genuinely happy for her. Jake and I went to visit her and George the following weekend. George was a warm, friendly guy who clearly cared deeply for my mom. Seeing her so happy and in love was heartwarming. It also made me think about my own future with Sarah. Speaking of Sarah, she had been amazing through all of this. Her support, patience, and love had been unwavering. One evening, after a particularly good day, I decided it was time to take a leap of faith. I planned a special dinner at home, just the two of us. I cooked her favorite meal, set the table with candles, and played some soft music in the background. After dinner, as we sat on the couch, I took her hand and told her how much she meant to me. I thanked her for being there through all the chaos, for supporting me and helping me rebuild my life. Then, I took a deep breath and asked her to move in with me. I wasn't ready for marriage yet, but I wanted to take the next step. She smiled, tears in her eyes, and said yes. It felt like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. We spent the rest of the evening talking about our future, about blending our lives even more closely together. Jake took the news well. He liked Sarah and saw how happy she made me. He was still dealing with his own issues, but having a stable, loving environment was helping him heal. We started making plans to turn Sarah's place into a home office for her and to create more space for Jake at my house. Life was starting to feel normal again, but there were still moments of doubt and fear. Linda was still out there, trying to rebuild her life, and I worried about how she would impact Jake. But we were taking things one day at a time, focusing on the positives, and working through the challenges together. One unexpected development came from Mark. He reached out again, this time to apologize sincerely. He said he was trying to turn his life around, and part of that meant making amends. He offered to help Jake with his schoolwork, using his expertise to tutor him in subjects he was struggling with. At first, I was hesitant, but Jake seemed open to it. We decided to give it a try with careful supervision. Surprisingly, it worked out well. Mark was patient and knowledgeable, and Jake responded positively. It was a weird twist having Mark back in our lives in a positive way, but it was also a reminder that people can change, and sometimes second chances are worth taking. As for me, I am continuing to work on myself. The woodworking classes are going great, and I even sold a few pieces at a local craft fair. It's been a wonderful outlet for my creativity and stress, so that's where things stand now. Life is still throwing challenges our way, but we are facing them together, stronger than before. Thanks for sticking with me through this journey. Your support has been incredible, and I'll keep you posted on how things go. After Sarah moved in, our home transformed into a place of warmth and love. She brought a sense of stability and happiness that we all needed. Jake was adapting well to the changes, and it felt like we were finally becoming a true family. One day, while cleaning out the attic, we stumbled upon an old box of photos and memorabilia. Jake and I spent hours going through the pictures, reminiscing about the good times. It was a therapeutic experience for both of us, reminding us of the bond we shared and the happy memories we created over the years. Sarah suggested we create a new family photo album, one that included her and documented our new life together. We spent a weekend taking pictures, laughing, and capturing moments that we would cherish forever. It was a simple but powerful way to symbolize our new beginning. Around this time, Linda reached out again. She wanted to discuss Jake's upcoming birthday and how we could celebrate together for his sake. It was a delicate situation, but we agreed to meet at a neutral location to discuss the details. Jake deserved to have both his parents present, even if it was awkward for us. The meeting went better than expected. Linda seemed genuinely committed to making amends and focusing on Jake's well-being. We agreed to throw a small party at a local park, inviting some of Jake's friends and family. It was a chance to show him that despite everything, we could still come together for his sake. The day of the party arrived, and it went off without a hitch. Linda and I were civil, even friendly at times, and Jake was thrilled to have everyone he cared about in one place. Seeing him happy made all the awkwardness worthwhile. Sarah was there too, blending seamlessly with everyone and making sure Jake had the best day. During the party, Linda pulled me aside. She thanked me for being willing to cooperate and expressed her regret for everything that had happened. She admitted she was still struggling, but was determined to turn her life around. It was a heartfelt conversation, and for the first time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to co-parent peacefully. After the party, things continued to improve. Jake's grades were steadily rising, and his mood was better than it had been in years. The tutoring sessions with Mark were paying off, and I couldn't deny the positive impact it was having. It was still strange having Mark around, but he was genuinely trying to make things right. One evening, as Sarah and I were preparing dinner, she brought up the idea of starting a family business. She had always been passionate about baking and suggested we open a small bakery together. It was an exciting prospect, combining her love for baking with my newfound passion for woodworking. We could create a cozy bakery with handmade furniture and baked goods. The idea felt right, like the next step in our journey. We started planning and researching, looking into locations, permits, and everything else we'd need to get started. Jake was excited about the idea too, offering to help with the business. It felt like a new chapter was unfolding, one filled with hope and possibility. As we moved forward with our plans, I couldn't help but reflect on how far we'd come. From the depths of betrayal and heartbreak, we were building something new and beautiful. It wasn't perfect, and there were still challenges to face, but we were doing it together. One night, after a long day of planning, Sarah and I sat on the porch, watching the stars. She turned to me and said, "I love our life together, and I can't wait to see where this journey takes us." Her words resonated deeply with me. I realized that despite all the ups and downs, I was truly happy. Jake was thriving, my relationship with Sarah was stronger than ever, and even Linda and I had found a way to coexist peacefully for Jake's sake. The bakery was becoming a reality, and our future looked bright. It's been a while since my last update, and I wanted to share how things have been progressing. Life has continued to surprise us, but in mostly wonderful ways. Here is the latest chapter of our journey. Our plans for the bakery moved along smoothly. We found a charming little place downtown that was perfect for our vision. It had enough space for a cozy cafe area and a small workshop where I could create custom furniture and decorations. We named it Sarah S. Sweets Treats, combining Sarah S. love for baking with my passion for woodworking. The grand opening was a huge success. Friends, family, and even some of our neighbors came out to support us. The place was buzzing with excitement, and it felt incredible to see our hard work come to fruition. Jake was in his element, helping out at the counter and interacting with customers. He seemed genuinely happy, which was the best part of it all. Linda even stopped by to show her support. It was awkward at first, but she was genuinely happy for us. She pulled me aside to talk, and we had another heartfelt conversation. She apologized again for everything and said she was proud of how we'd all managed to move forward. It was a moment of closure, a sign that we were truly turning the page. As the bakery thrived, our family life settled into a new rhythm. Jake continued to excel in school, and his relationship with Sarah grew stronger. They bonded over baking and spent hours in the kitchen experimenting with new recipes. It was heartwarming to see them so close, and I knew Sarah's presence had made a huge difference in his life. One evening, after a particularly busy day at the bakery, Sarah and I sat down to relax. We were exhausted but happy. She turned to me and said, "I have something to tell you." I could see the nervous excitement in her eyes. She took a deep breath and continued, "I am pregnant." I was stunned, but in the best possible way. We hadn't been trying, but we also hadn't been not trying, if you know what I mean. The news was a shock, but it felt like the perfect next step in our journey. We hugged, laughed, and cried tears of joy. It was a beautiful, unexpected gift. We shared the news with Jake, who was thrilled at the idea of becoming a big brother. He immediately started talking about all the things he wanted to teach the baby and how he'd help out. It was a moment of pure joy, and I felt incredibly blessed. As Sarah's pregnancy progressed, we focused on preparing for the baby while juggling the bakery and our daily lives. It was hectic, but we were happy. We found out we were having a girl and decided to name her Emily. The excitement in our home was palpable, and it brought us even closer together. Linda continued to be involved in Jake's life, and our co-parenting relationship improved significantly. She was genuinely trying to be a better person, and while the scars of the past would always be there, we found a way to coexist peacefully for Jake's sake. Mark's involvement with Jake's tutoring had a positive impact as well. Jake's grades continued to improve, and he developed a newfound confidence in his abilities. Mark was proving to be a man of his word, and I had to admit, he was making a genuine effort to change. The bakery became more than just a business. It was a community hub where people came to enjoy delicious treats and good company. We hosted events, workshops, and even started a weekly family night where parents could bring their kids for fun activities and treats. It was everything we'd dreamed of, and more. As Sarah's due date approached, we made sure everything was ready for Emily's arrival. The nursery was decorated, the house was baby-proofed, and we were filled with anticipation. On a beautiful spring morning, Sarah went into labor. It was a long and intense day, but when Emily was finally born, all the pain and effort were worth it. She was perfect, and our hearts were full. Bringing Emily home was an incredible experience. Jake was an amazing big brother, always eager to help and showering her with love. Sarah and I were exhausted but overjoyed. Our family felt complete in a way I never could have imagined when this journey began. Reflecting on everything that has happened, I am amazed at how far we've come. From the depths of betrayal and heartache, we've built a new life filled with love, hope, and new beginnings. It wasn't easy, and there were times I thought we'd never get here, but we did. And for that, I'm incredibly grateful. So Reddit, thank you for being with me through this roller coaster. Your support, advice, and encouragement have meant the world to me. As I look toward the future, I am filled with hope and excitement. Life is still unpredictable, but I am ready to face whatever comes our way, with my family by my side.